Hi, everyone. Welcome to Art and Talk. Thank you so much for being with us today. I'm Leslie Sue, the host for Art and Talk. Today, we have our first guest artist who is currently on exhibit at The Gathering, which is a multimedia exhibit at the Cultural Council for Palm Beach County in Lake Worth Beach, Florida. This week and the next week, we'll be presenting a collection of artists that are also exhibiting in this exhibit as well. So let's talk a little bit about what The Gathering is about. The Gathering is about how we gather together. Sometimes we gather together for celebrations. Sometimes we gather together for impromptu events. So it's really examining and exploring different ways we gather together. It could be with loved ones, it could be with neighbors, it could be with coworkers, it could be with strangers. So today, our guest from The Gathering is a designer and furniture maker specializing in wood. We'll be diving into his art and his art journey. We'll be looking at his piece that is currently on exhibit at The Gathering, and we'll be looking at some of his other handcrafted wood furniture. So thanks again for being with us today. And I'd like to welcome our guest, Robert Wolfkill. Robert, welcome.
Thank you.
Awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and I was just mentioning before the recording, I love your whole backdrop, and you were telling me that the piece that houses your tools behind you, you actually made while you were in school.
Yeah, I received my training up at Rockport, Maine a few years ago, and it was there's a series of 3 projects that the students have to undertake, and they get progressively more challenging as the projects unfold. And the 3rd project was you have to design or build anything that has a door and a drawer, because they want to check and see your efficiency on doing both designing and building drawers and doors into a piece of furniture. So I racked my brain for a little while, and I figured that I would build an old-fashioned tool cabinet to house my hand tools that I could actually bring back to the shop and use, for the rest of my life. So it's a cool project.
Yeah, absolutely. It's gorgeous. So tell us, Robert, this runs in your family, this craftsman skill and ability with working with wood and whatnot. Tell us a little bit of a background with how you began this, your influence with your family.
Yeah, sure, it does. Actually, my bio said that my last name, Wolfkill, can be traced back to the 1800s era carpenters. And my father read it and he goes, no, it's the 1700s. And I had always thought that they were started as block layers and block builders, but he told me just recently that the very, very first generation were coffin makers. So it's a little morbid for this conversation, but very interesting, and that is obviously made with wood back then too. So through the lineage, I remember as a small child just watching my grandfather. He was a home builder, and I was always around tools that he had, and he was always very helpful showing me how to use them. And I literally watched him build houses up in Georgia from the foundation up. My dad would help him, and then later on in life, when my dad's work slowed down, he took up some fine woodworking, and he bought a series of tools and had them in his garage and started tinkering, built some really nice pieces, during the later span of his life. And it always interested me, from a child. So something I'm glad I could continue to do.
Mm-hmm. And did you naturally gravitate towards this? You were saying like you were around this with your grandfather and your father, and watching them, and just kind of like, did you have like a sense of like this is for me too, when you had the tools and just kind of like getting your feet wet as a little kid?
I really didn't. It kind of took me. The first part of my life I spent as a policeman, so I had a totally different trade. And recently, in the past 3 years, became a professional woodworker. But I started tinkering in my 20s when I got my first apartment. We got our first condo, my wife and I, and we started shopping for bookcases. And I got really frustrated, like some people do, with the quality and the aesthetics and the way that the furniture that was being offered to us was built and crafted and the price point. And, thinking back to everything that I had been exposed to, I figured I could do it just as well, if not better, for myself. And I started just working on the back patio. It was an open patio with a skill saw, like most people start, buying lumber at Home Depot and whatnot, and built my first bookcase, which I still have today, out of just raw oak and oak plywood, and felt very rewarding. Felt a deep connection with that. That was my first piece, and through my 20s and 30s and 40s, as I told you, I was a policeman, so I didn't have a lot of spare time, but I would tinker on the weekends and holidays and my off time, building pieces for myself and my family, just watching my craft grow and grow and grow, purchasing more tools, self-taught at that point, seeking more education online, basically through videos, through my father, and just growing from that point on until to where I ended up now in my journey.
Mhm. So that's an interesting evolution. So you were kind of set up for this, so to speak, as a young boy, but then you moved into a different profession, as you were saying, being a policeman, but yet you kind of started to create these things with your family, kind of seeing that there was a need for it, looking at, you said, like the price point, and probably kind of filtering in some of the experiences that you had, and just the know-how, and just, I guess, also the confidence to be able to build something as well. And then, as you were saying, then your skills just started to evolve and to increase and to where you are now.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that has to be the ultimate high, in a sense, that if you need something, that you are able to create it. And of course, now we're talking about something that's, very functional, whether it's, a dresser, the piece that's behind you, or a table. That is just, really the ultimate, to have that skill and ability. Do you view that as the same way, or something different?
I do, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because art has so many different facets, visually, sculpture, paintings, music, dance. So much of it is on display at the cultural center down in Palm Beach. But I was always drawn to the functionality of my art. So I get a real deep, intense thrill out of seeing people be able to use my pieces and appreciate them for the design, aesthetics, and the beauty. But the functionality is a really core key to me. So I'll go to, some of my work is 25 years old. So I could go to an old friend, or back then I was building for friends and family, walk into an old friend or family member's house, and all of a sudden I see the piece that I built 20 some odd years ago still being used. It's very rewarding to me to know that it's being appreciated and used and loved. It's almost like walking into a crowded room and seeing an old friend. It kind of welcomes you back, and you can remember the memories of how it was designed and built, and the process that you went through to undertake that. Is a very special experience for me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that you shared that. That is so beautiful, Robert. So, like, when you go back and you see the piece that you made, first of all, you were saying that it feels like a friend, and then you kind of are going through the process, through memories of what it took to actually create that, and then seeing the joy that the person in our family, the people who are using that in a functional aspect, just the joy of that. That's really quite beautiful.
Yeah, the functionality is what really ties me to it, and then being able to combine the functionality with the artistic design, building something that's one of a kind, that's never been built before, working through all those challenges just makes it a real special experience for me, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Let's go ahead and talk about the piece that you have at the gathering at the Cultural Council for Palm Beach County. I love that you're our first guest, because I feel that what you created really helps give a visual sense, and as we're talking about, a functional sense of gathering. I think it just really helps to solidify and kind of begin, as Art and Talk is, I'm going to be presenting a collection of artists, to start with you, with what you created. So can you tell us a little bit about it, and then we'll pull up some images?
Oh, sure. So there's nothing more special when you think about gathering and functional art and furniture than a large dining table, because it just brings these glimpses and these thoughts of maybe a Thanksgiving dinner, a special celebration where family and friends gather, and they gather at, eventually they gather at that table to celebrate and talk and come together and eat and just enjoy each other. And a large dining table is really the undercore of that for me, is really super big part of a gathering type piece of furniture. But Jessica Ransom I had joined the Cultural Council as a artist a few years back, and Jessica had been following my work, I believe, and reached out to me early summer and told me about the exhibit that she was curating, and thought that it would be amazing to have a large gathering table as part of the exhibit. And originally for me, obviously work there is for sale. For me, initially, the thought was that if I'm going to build, she said she wanted a big table, by the way. So big tables bring along big challenges too, because of the size, the amount of work and labor, the amount of materials that are involved, and a lot of the design aspects. So I didn't hesitate to tell her yes, but in the back of my mind, I was thinking, oh man, it's hard for me as a one-person shop to build a piece that big, and then offering it for sale at the end of the exhibit. If it doesn't sell, what do I do? What do I do with this huge, beautiful piece? So there were a lot of things I had to consider when she first approached me.
Yeah, let's go ahead and show the table. Give me a second and we'll pull it up. Okay, gorgeous. What else would you like to share? This is the actual.
Okay, so yeah, I'll take you for a tour. So the table is about 10 feet long, and the matching stools are about a little over 9 feet. It sits about 30 inches high, which is a comfortable height for a dining table. The important thing for me was to emphasize that spirit of gathering was not to have chairs and not to have end seating. So I thought a lot about the design, and I wanted to have side-by-side seating. So the table is a side seater. Everyone sits on either side. There's really no room for anyone to sit segregated on the ends. So everyone sits together on those long benches. And just the image of having, like, almost imagining a picnic style table, but obviously a picnic table is not appropriate for this type of gallery. So it had to be super high end, sleek, beautiful. And what I did was I adapted a design that I've done twice before in a coffee table size, and it's mid-century modern inspired. So, mid-century modern brings to mind sleek lines, clean edges, minimal ornamentation, and most often the daintily carved legs that come down to a smaller point at the bottom. So this is all quarters. It's called quarter sawn Sapele Mahogany. So this is a sustainable wood from Africa. Obviously, we don't harvest mahogany in this country anymore. I think it's protected now because of over harvesting, but it's a sustainable wood. It's a beautiful straight grain wood. I have a piece of it here. That's this is how I buy it, rough sawn. I don't know if you can tell the texture here, but it comes just in a really rugged, harsh block, huge planks, just really, really rugged. And then I have to mill and bring it down to the final specs. And when it's finalized, the quarter sawn section anyway, which means the grain runs this way through the log, not this way. It exposes these beautiful ribbon grains. So it's very unique to the lumber. And I incorporate that into the design of the table to run along the length of the top and the top of the benches. But the legs anyway were also built from the same material, brought together into large chunks and then carved by hand to get that detail on the legs when they go from larger at the top to more dainty at the bottom.
Mhm.
All the joinery was done by hand. I don't know if you can see in the photo on the upper part of the legs, there's kind of a rectangular block and then two circles on the side. That's through joinery. It's the old fashioned proper way to build furniture where you don't use mechanical fasteners or screws or nails. It's actually a piece of the wood that's accepted into the mortise and comes all the way through, and it's cut off. You can see where the darkness of the wood changes there. That's the end grain of the wood coming through the joint. And then they're pegged with hardwood pegs that get driven all the way through. And it gives just a beautiful, like handcrafted look. And it's the pinpoint of fine, fine furniture is something that's emphasized when you see joinery that's done in that fashion. You can know that someone designed it and built it to last many, many lifetimes and to be handed down. There's a lot of angles and curves and chamfers and different aesthetically pleasing parts of the design. You can kind of see if you look at the front apron is arched, the legs are splayed at 5 degrees. Everything from the table to the benches, they're an exact match. So like the bench is kind of like a mini me of the table. Both benches are. And the finish is also very unique, if you'd like me to talk about that as well.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, so I've been kind of perfecting a really old school technique of ebonizing wood. So you can tell that the table on first glance is almost a black ebony tone, which is very much different than the wood looks when it's milled, because it's a light brown and a dark brown and a little bit of reddish tone in it. So there's an old technique that's been around for a long time, and it's a method of ebonizing wood, turning it black. But it goes deep into the pores, so it's not like you spray painted something or stained it. It's embedded into the wood. It's why it gives it such a special look and feel. But it's actually very simple. It's just a mixture of white vinegar that I use. And I have a big tub of my grandfather's old, like 40 or 50 old keys. And the keys are metal, obviously. So you let the vinegar sit in the metal for about 3 days. Every time you walk by it, kind of jiggle it up a little bit and agitate it. And what happens is the metal from the wood, from the keys, gets dissolved just a tiny bit into that vinegar solution. And then you triple, quadruple strain that until it's ultra clear. And when you wipe that solution on certain types of wood, it has that ebonization effect. There's only a handful of American woods that will do it. And Sapele Mahogany is one of them. This was the first time I've actually used that technique on this type of material. But it's bizarre to see because the mixture is clear and you wipe it on by hand on the wood. And then like before your eyes in 20 or 30 seconds, it just suddenly just slowly turns this really gorgeous black.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it's deep into the pores. So it's not, I don't know if you bought furniture before that looks dark. And then the first time you walk by it with your purse and you nick it, you can see the light wood underneath. It's almost like it has a stain, a heavy stain or a paint over it to cover up the beauty of the wood. This will never do that because it's embedded in. It's part of the wood. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to see some of the browns, and I definitely wanted to see that beautiful ribbon grain. So then I had to sand it back, very, very fine sanding by hand, just to where I got enough of the ebonization off to where I could see just enough of the brown and the grain until I was satisfied with the look. And then everything after that got a very tedious 3 coats of an oil and varnish mixture. So that the oil penetrates into the wood, deep into the pores. Mm-hmm. And as that's flashing off, the varnish starts to dry. So you get that protective, beautiful satin protective finish on it as well.
Mm-hmm. It's an absolutely gorgeous piece. And I so appreciate, Robert, you going through your process of how you created it. And the thought process initially, tying it in with the theme of the gathering was so on point. You really created something that really solidifies the whole essence of gathering, from creating a long table to really thinking about every aspect of it all the way through, prior to actually creating it, like with the benches, as you were saying, or what was the seating going to be, because you really do get a sense of, and when I was actually there during the opening, and I was looking at this gorgeous table, I really helped to conjure up within me, and I'm sure everybody else that was there, all of a sudden this sense of gathering, and you're around, like you mentioned, Thanksgiving, it could be a holiday, it could be an everyday meal, but you really had that sense of gathering and being together, and what better way than a table, and just the whole construction of it and the whole design is amazing. And you really help us as we have the image pulled up, Robert, and you were describing the process of creating, and all the different steps is quite elaborate. You're really honing our eye into really seeing the beauty of it, and really being able to see what goes into the craftsmanship of it. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Sure. It's almost like any piece of art that if you were, there's so many really fine details. And one of the things that I learned in my training is when you see something you really, really like and it catches your eye, maybe you're walking past something and it brings you to a dead stop and you say, I like that. But what you need to do, what I try to teach myself to do, and it's not easy, and what other artists seem to do, is stop and say, well, why is that beautiful? Why do I like that so much? And then you just really have to stop and analyze everything about that object to try to take away something from it. But if you're in front of a piece of art with the artist, they're obviously going to bring so much more detail to the story and to back to your eye for you to appreciate. And it's almost the curator told me that people walk by the table during the exhibit and they're struck by it and they like it and they reach out to touch it and they almost pull their hand back every time. And she tells them, you can touch it, because it was one of the discussions that I had with the curator from the beginning was, obviously it's going to get some wear and tear. People are going to sit and gather on it. It's going to be in a busy exhibit area. She was worried, is it durable? It's even possible that someone could put a wet drink on it, or put their purse on the bench, or drag their purse across the top. And that's what's special to me is, yeah, it's durable. It's made for life. It's made to be passed down, and it's made to be used. And that's how I design my work and build it.
That's beautiful, and it's so amazing that you care so enough about what your creation, that you give it not only the functionality which is going to have, but also that lasting quality and that durableness, that aspect of as well.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's almost pointless to build something that I don't think is going to last, because there's that connection. It's almost, if you talk to other craftspeople that build things that are functional, they'll tell you that you almost have a connection with it when you're building it, and you can I kind of envision like the use of it through future generations, the end user. And for me to build something that I don't think would last is kind of pointless.
Right.
I don't think I would even do it.
Yeah. Yes. And I love how you're describing your connection with your creation. You're thinking about how it's going to be used, how it's going to be passed down. That's such a beautiful thought that you're really infusing into the piece as you're creating it. I'm wondering, Robert, if you can take us back to, as you had elaborated on before, we looked at the piece in the gathering when Jessica approached you, and you were saying you were kind of going through a little bit of kind of a thought process, so to speak, and what to create. Once you decided to create it, did you start to do any type of sketches? Did you How did you actually begin the process? So we can kind of dive in a little bit into the initial stages as well as of your creative process.
Sure, yeah. I'll always with my designs begin with rough sketches, and like I said before, that table I already had a jump start on because I built that table twice before in a coffee table size. But I had always from the first time I built it, I fell in love with it. Everybody that sees the coffee table is just absolutely they're struck by it. It's very light and dainty and beautiful. The proportions are really nice, and it has that handcrafted look and feel. And when Jessica, the curator, approached me to build the gathering table, you know, design thoughts were going through my head like crazy for a couple of weeks, back and forth. What do I want the table to look like? What do I want it to feel like? What type of style, what type of furniture style should I use to, what am I envisioning, you know, as an end product? And my mind just kept bouncing back to that same table, that same coffee table I had designed prior through sketches, prototypes, and finally finalized on the final aesthetics. And I just couldn't see designing a brand new style until I had brought that table to life in a full-size table. So I thought it was a great opportunity to do that, and it brought challenges because the coffee table that's built in that style, it's called my Leonore table. It's named after the lady who commissioned me to build the first one. Her name was Leonore. I had to obviously go from about a 40-inch small dainty coffee table to a 10-foot long, 30-inch high, massive, you know, table. So all the proportions had to be right. Part of the other thing that was troubling me is the weight. So that top, my son and I moved that top into the gallery, and I think if I was a year or two older, I wouldn't have got it in. You know, it really tested both of our abilities. So probably more like a 4-person move than a 2-person, but trying to make sure the substructure, the legs and the joinery could support that weight brought other challenges to me as well. So I had to be really careful in designing the joinery and making sure that everything would accomplish that.
Mhm.
But that table did start from an inspiration. So I think that's what you're asking me originally. I'm sorry. The client who asked me to build the first table in that design gave me an inspiration photo, and it was a rough, like a mid-century modern, classic mid-century modern table with very small tapered legs and sort of an oval top with a very nice chamfer on it. And from that inspiration photo, that's when I launched the design process to finalize everything from A to Z on how I was going to build that table. So usually it does start, if a client approaches me to build a piece, it does start with some type of inspiration. And that was just a photograph that she had of a table she found on the internet somewhere from the mid-century era. And she wanted me to build it. So I had to incorporate and design and change what I thought the table should look like into what it looks like today.
Mhm. What a great inspiration to launch into this piece.
Yeah, it normally does start that way. Sometimes when I'm building a spec piece, we call it in my trade is you're speculating that you want to build something that someone may like in the future or that you like. You don't start from any type of inspiration. You start from very rough sketches, and then you build rough prototypes out of cardboard and other materials, and you change all the dimensions and change everything until you get everything tweaked exactly how you want it to look. And then from there, you start thinking about, all right, how am I going to actually build this? You know, what materials am I going to use? What's the joinery? What's the finish? Everything from A to Z from there. So there's a whole process that I do go through when I build new spec pieces. It's very, very detailed, long process. And if you don't do it right, because it's never been built before, if you don't do it right, it looks clumsy and very awkward. So it's very important to really tone down and take your time when you're designing something like that. I have I don't know if you can see it here, but I have a TV console table that I built and designed when I was in school. And it's very elaborate with a lot of curved pieces and parts. This is the top, but there's a whole, there's a lot to it. So all of these angles and curves and joinery and thicknesses all have to be perfected to get to where you like it, down to where it functions properly. So when you're building something that's never been built before, that's kind of what's involved.
So in the new spec pieces, it's quite a lot of thinking about the whole design aspect of it, as you said, from A to Z, starting with the sketches and the proportions and all the different aspects it's going to make it, to be a beautiful piece that's functional and that's durable. You've really taken us through a beautiful education into the process that you go through. And so I'm wondering, once you're actually in the process, once you've kind of gone through all that, preliminary sketches, and you've pretty well thought it out through what are going to be the challenges, how are you going to overcome it, what about this, what about that, kind of fine tuning that. And then you start to get into the creation of it, Robert. Does it change from the actual thought process to the actual creation of it, or does it stay pretty much the same? Like, can you give us a little feel for, what changes actually in the creative process, or like some of the challenges that you thought maybe some are easier, but then maybe new ones come up? Can you give us a couple examples?
Yeah, and it's really important because these materials are very expensive, obviously, and precious. Some of the woods that I buy are, you wouldn't believe the price that we pay for the woods, and the superior cuts of woods, and so specific about how it looks and the grain patterns and everything. You don't want to waste any of that ever. So that's why it goes back to a lot of the prototypes. So like when I built this side table, I prototyped this in styrofoam and cardboard and just junk plywood and hot glue and staples, and use anything you can to make sure that you have it right before you start cutting wood. And that includes the joinery, because if it won't hold together, then it's useless as well. So there's so much thought into that prototyping stage, and going from the rough draft to the rough prototype before you start cutting the wood. It just has to be resolved. But there are often some stumbling blocks that come up, like you said. I mean, like with this table, I designed it with some of the best furniture instructors in the world when I was in Rockport, Maine. It was my third project, my fourth last project that involved curvature. And there was an instructor there from New Zealand who makes gorgeous rocking chairs from New Zealand hardwoods. And he's an expert in bending wood. And I was lucky to have him there because this table is all about curves. There's not one straight line on the table. And when we went to steam bend the wood, we found out after all the design was done and we were ready, everything was finalized, was ready to start constructing, we found out that the radius of the curve was too radical and the piece kept cracking every time we tried to steam bend it. And like you said, sometimes things do pop up that you don't really realize. So we went through a bunch of technical ways to try to get the wood to bend. You're forcing a straight piece of wood to bend in this radical manner and to dry in that shape. So we had to construct specialized braces and taper the wood, steam it a little longer, soak it the night before, and finally we were able to get two pieces to bend around that radius. That was something that came up that we didn't know. And then I brought the table back from school. It wasn't assembled yet. I didn't have time to complete it, and finally completed it. And when I walked by it the first time, I hit it with my leg and it just almost got flung across the shop. And I couldn't believe it. And the problem was it was so light that was completely unpredictable. There was no way to predict how heavy the piece was going to be. Is it going to sit and be functional, at the end game? And it wasn't. It was too light because it's all very daintily curved wood. So I brainstormed and I ended up having to mortise in some solid brass rods on the bottom. I don't know if you can see. So these are all solid 1-inch brass rods that go into the base of it. So I ordered the brass, cut it, and mortised it in, epoxied them in strategic locations, and it gave just the right amount of weight to the bottom base of the piece so that it would be completely functional.
Mhm.
But yeah, there are always things, when you're building something that's never been done before, there are always things that do pop up, no matter how hard and thorough your planning is.
Yeah, those are some great examples. Thank you for sharing that. And it's amazing the troubleshooting that comes into, like in this last piece that you were speaking about when you thought everything out, but then things are always going to come up. And then you had this table and it was kind of like it moved across in your studio space. And then you were like, okay, now we have to fix that. Some of these things are just going to come up and you just have to kind of, find these ways to resolve them.
You really do. And then so much invested at that point, it's so critical that you get it right. So much time and money and stress invested in that vision that you have for this thing that's never been made before. And you really have to work through a lot of problems at the end sometimes.
Yeah. We have some more images of your beautiful furniture creations. Let's go ahead and pull some up and have you share about them as well, if you would.
Great.
Okay. Okay, this is another view of the exhibition piece. If you just wanted to add a little touch, Robert.
Yeah, sure. It's a good view. It's one of my favorite views because it shows that that beautiful front stretcher that connects the legs.
Mhm.
And I really like the way on a traditional table, that front apron or front stretcher is butted up all the way to where it touches the top. So I designed this piece to have that airy, light opening in between the top of that top stretcher and the top. So you can almost see through and see how it's almost unimaginable how light and dainty that top looks, but it's massive, Like I said before, it's 10 feet long, over 4 feet wide, 1.25 inches thick. It's like, we weren't able to put it on the scale, but it's probably 300 pounds. But it's a technique that, going with the style, the mid-century style, this technique makes the table look light and airy. And I don't know if you can tell, but the bottom part of that front stretcher is arched as well. So that there's a very slight arch in that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a chamfer where it comes in and it gets mortised into the base. There are little things that, unless you spoke with the person that built it, you might not notice at first, but you look at it and you say, hopefully you say, I like how that looks, but I don't know why. Lots of little features that make that come to life. And the top has, in this design, the top is about 1.25 inches thick, a very heavy chamfer on the underside. Chamfer is just basically a cut that's done at a 45-degree angle. And what that does is, when you look at the top of the table and the bench, it looks like it's only about a 3/8 of an inch thick. In reality, it's 1.25 inches because that chamfer accomplishes that, makes it look light.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite parts about the table, and the rounded edges too. Most traditional tables you see are square, rectangular. The rounded edges also give that feeling.
Yes. Thank you so much.
You can see.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You can kind of see the grain lines in that picture too. You can see these long ribbon grains that are inherent in that type of wood and that cut. So it's kind of a cool picture.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a beautiful table. Not only the craftsmanship, but the thought that went into it to, as we were saying, to coordinate with the theme. And it's just so beautifully executed. It's a gorgeous piece, Robert.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's go ahead and move on to another piece.
Yeah, so this is my European beach bench. And this was a project that I also brought home from the Center for Furniture Craftsmanship in Rockport, Maine. You can see, I think the tag on that junker car there is from Maine, the junker truck that's in the background. So it was our first part of my training. First project is to do hand cut dovetails. So you don't see it much anymore, but in the old style of furniture making, there are always dovetail joints. Those, if you look on the closest part of that image, you can see those triangular change in color there. That's a dovetail joint where the top meets the side portion. So that's all cut by hand and by eye with chisels and hand saws to accomplish a joint that's impossibly strong, because it locks into itself. There's no fasteners again in any of my work. It's all wood to wood glue joinery. So this project was for us to show our skills and practice our skills in dovetailing. And I decided to build this bench out of European beech, which is a really beautiful dense wood with straight grain, beautiful amber tone. And I went through the same design process with this bench as I spoke of earlier, where you start off with a really rough sketch, change it about 100 times, change all the details, perfect the sketch, move on to prototypes out of cardboard and just MDF and whatever throwaway materials you have that are quick hot glued, until you get all the aspects correct. The front of the bench, you can see the two thinner legs in the front. They're accomplished with a through mortise, which is basically means that if you have the top, the leg is actually coming through the top. So you have to cut a perfectly clean mortise to accept the tenon where the leg comes through, and it's pegged with a wedge. So there's a contrasting walnut wedge in that joint. So when you look at it from the top, you see the leg coming through and the walnut wedge that's drove in, but it's shaved and cleaned and sanded, obviously perfectly smooth on the top. So it gives you that, when you see a very fine piece of furniture, your first instinct is to reach out and touch it because it looks impossible. Your brain says, how is that? Is that really that smooth? Is that really that clean? Is that joint really that flush? And to the average person, you almost have to feel it to confirm what your mind is thinking. So that's my goal when I designed this bench. My first time seeing very, very fine furniture was in the gallery where I received my teaching in Maine. They have a gallery there that's constantly exhibiting work of instructors, students, and local artists. And I saw when I was there were about 8 or 10 pieces in there, and it absolutely blew my mind because I was self-taught my whole career, and I needed a lot of work on my designing, which I accomplished in my training, and a lot of work on seriously fine-tuning my joinery and final sanding, final finishing, so much that goes into a fine piece. And when you see it for the first time, like I did, I couldn't believe it. I was just absolutely blown away. I've never seen anything like that before in my life. So that's my goal to today anyway, is to make, a piece that's the most beautiful thing in your home. That's my goal from the onset. So I'm envisioning my client and the end space where the piece is going to go. And my goal is this has to be the most beautiful thing in their home. So this bench I took on my route home back to my condo from school. There was this broken down truck and a beautiful summertime Maine field of flowers and rocks and just a beautiful photographic spot. And I stopped and put the bench down and got some really nice photos there in the field in Maine, which is kind of appropriate because that's where it was designed and built.
Yes, it's a beautiful piece. Robert, we only have a few more minutes, but I do want to show a few other images so that everybody can see them. Gorgeous, beautiful.
Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful. And I think we have one more, Robert. Yes. This was the piece that you were speaking of.
Yeah, that's the solstice side table that I showed you earlier.
Yes. Beautiful. Love the curves.
Thank you.
You've given us such a wonderful education with our eye and how to actually look at wood. I think that after people view this video interview, they'll be able to look around their home and look at, because, pretty much everybody has some, wood pieces around their home, whether it's a dresser or tables and whatnot. We'll really be able to look with a discerning eye, and we have you to thank for that. As we have a few more minutes, is there anything about your journey with designing, furniture making with wood that you would like to share with us, Robert?
I just feel incredibly lucky to be able to pursue my passion, just from everyone that's spent time to teach me, from A to Z, and incredibly lucky to have a beautiful studio here. I'm out in Western Palm Beach County in, they call it the city Loxahatchee, but it's a unincorporated, we're on 1.5 acres. It's a very quiet, I have over 100 pine trees on the property. And this is where my studio and shop is, and just feel very blessed every day to be able to as long as I'm able to come out and create and build, hopefully very beautiful things.
Mhm. Are you able to work every day? Is that sort of the typical day that you have?
I do. I work 6 days a week at least. It depends on my bookings, but yeah, I'm in the shop almost every day. I do my own marketing, and obviously I have to source my products. So kind of on the 7th day, I take care of those issues. But I'm basically hands-on almost every day I'm here.
Mhm. You have shared so much with us. I can't thank you enough, Robert. We have, such a good education, in just as, 45 minutes or so into your world, Robert, of design and furniture making and working with wood and all that goes into it. I'm so grateful for all that you shared with us. I know that you also accept commission pieces. So if you could let us know how we can stay connected with you, your social media links, and how can people who want to have a commission piece for their home for you to beautifully design for them, let us know how they can reach you in that way. And if you'd like to add any other final comments, please.
Oh yeah. Oh, and before I forget, thank you so much for what you do for artists. We're sort of voiceless, because you always hear the term struggling artist or starving artist, and it really is true. It's very, very hard to get your work out there, because you can see a picture of something, but it's just not the same unless you're introduced to the artist and you can have the opportunity to interact with them and see it in person. It's so important. Really appreciate what you do for us as well. But anyway, my business name is Wolfkill Woodwork. My last name is Wolfkill, and pretty much my Instagram, Facebook business, and my website is all in that vein. So wolfkillwoodwork.com is my webpage. I've been working on that for several years, trying to get everything very nice and trying to show my work. Instagram, I post almost daily on my Instagram page, and Facebook as well. And you can, through any of those venues, there's a contact me button, or you can call me, email me, and reach out to me. And I love to work with all my clients. It's very, very special process for me working with the client, from that first phone call until the delivery of the piece. I do it all myself by hand, and it's a very special process for me interacting with the client when we set out to build something brand new, special, customized for them. It's very rewarding.
Mhm. I'm so grateful that you're able to pursue your passion, Robert, and what you love to do. I think that's come through very evident, as you've been sharing with us that, this is really where, you're in your element, so to speak, when you're creating these beautiful furniture pieces. And we wish you much success with all that you're going to be creating and with the exhibit currently going on at the gathering. And stay connected with us and let us know of new creations and new developments that happen in your design making and your wood making.
I will. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching today. And just wanted to tie in that the gathering exhibit, if you're local to South Florida or if you're just traveling through, you definitely want to check it out. It is running through January 15th. So you want to check out these amazing, talented artists that are on exhibit there. And again, we always appreciate the time you take to watch our artist videos. Stay connected with us on YouTube, on Facebook, and on Twitter. We appreciate your support, and we'll talk soon on the next Art and Talk. Until then, be well and be blessed.